The human ship Starfire moved slowly through space toward the massive station that hung in the darkness like a metal city. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood at the viewing window watching the alien structure grow larger as they approached. The station was 10 times bigger than anything humans had ever built. Lights blinked across its surface in patterns that made no sense to human eyes. Jake was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic service. Behind him stood Lisa Campbell, his young aide who carried a tablet full of notes and treaties. Near the door waited Ryan Torres, the security chief whose job was to keep them all safe. "It's huge," Lisa said quietly as she looked out the window. Her voice showed both wonder and fear. Jake nodded. "The Galactic Council Station has been here for over 1,000 years. Every major species in the galaxy has a section of it. Today we try to earn our place among them." Ryan checked his weapon one more time. He was a former soldier who had fought in Earth's last war before humans reached. "The stars. Sir, my team is ready if anything goes wrong." "Nothing will go wrong," Jake said with confidence he did not entirely feel. "We are here as friends. We come in peace." The Starfire docked with a soft bump that barely shook the ship. Jake straightened his uniform and picked up his briefcase. Inside were documents that represented 3 years of hard work, treaties, trade agreements, and proof that humanity deserved a seat at the galactic table. The airlock opened with a hiss. Cool air flowed in carrying strange smells. Jake walked forward into a corridor that was too tall for humans. The ceiling stretched. High above them, alien symbols covered the walls in colors that hurt to look at. Their guide was waiting. It looked like a giant insect with 4 arms and compound eyes. Its translator device spoke in a flat mechanical voice. "I am Guide 7. You will follow me to the council chambers." They walked through corridors filled with beings from across the galaxy. Jake saw creatures that looked like walking trees, others that floated in bubbles of water, and some that were just clouds of light. All of them stared at the humans as they passed. Jake could hear them talking in languages his translator could not understand. The council chamber was a vast room with a dome ceiling. Hundreds of seats were arranged in circles around a central platform. Most of them were filled with delegates from different worlds. The noise was incredible as dozens of species all talked at once. Guide 7 led them to a small section marked with Earth's symbol. 3 simple chairs sat empty, while around them aliens occupied elaborate thrones and floating platforms. Jake sat down and opened his briefcase. "Welcome to the Galactic Council," a voice boomed across the chamber. The speaker was a being that looked like a crystal tree. "Today we hear from the newest applicants for membership in our ancient alliance." Jake stood and walked to the central platform. Every eye in the room focused on him. He felt very small and very alone. "Honored delegates," he began. "I am Ambassador Jake Morrison of Earth. We come before you today seeking membership in the Galactic Trade Consortium." Laughter erupted from one section of the chamber. Jake looked toward the sound and saw a group of warriors in dark armor. They were tall and muscular with scales instead of skin. Their leader stood and spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "I am War Commander Thekvar of the Vorthic Empire. These humans amuse me. They have been in space for barely 3 years and already think they belong among us." More laughter came from his followers. From another section came a different voice, cold and precise. "High Scientist Valana of the Kelani Federation speaks. We have studied human technology. It is primitive beyond measure. Your fastest ships move like insects compared to ours. Your weapons could not damage our shields. What can such a young species offer us?" An ancient being that looked like it was made of living shadow spoke next. Its voice whispered like wind through dead leaves. "Elder Quinsith of the Geltar Collective observes. This species has existed for mere thousands of years. We have watched stars be born and die. What wisdom can children teach their elders?" Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks but kept his voice steady. "We offer partnership, not just trade. Humans are quick to learn and eager to help. We have solved problems on our world through cooperation. We believe we can do the same among the stars. Cooperation, HFY spit, you mean weakness. The strong take what they need. The weak serve the strong. This is the way of the galaxy. Perhaps. Velana added, in another century humans might be ready for galactic society. But today you are like children playing with toys they do not understand. Other delegates began to speak, but Jake could barely hear them over the blood pounding in his ears. Every word was an insult. Every laugh was like a slap. But he stood straight and kept his face calm. Hours passed. Jake presented Earth's achievements, their art, their science, their desire for peace. Each time he spoke, the aliens found new ways to dismiss him. They called humans weak, primitive, worthless. Finally, the session ended. The crystal being announced that humanity's application would be reviewed and a decision made at some future date. Jake knew this meant never. As the chamber emptied, Jake gathered his papers with steady hands. Lisa looked like she might cry. Ryan's face was red with anger. Ambassador, Ryan said quietly, we don't have to take this. Yes, we do, Jake replied. For now. But let them think what they want about us. Sometimes it is better to be underestimated. They walked back to their ship through corridors that seemed even longer than before. Alien voices followed them, speaking. Words like pathetic and useless in a dozen different languages. That night in his quarters, Jake sat at his desk writing a report to Earth. He told them about the meeting, about the insults, about the complete failure of diplomacy. But he also wrote something else, a single line that would change everything. Recommend immediate implementation of Protocol 7. He sealed the message and sent it toward Earth at light speed. Then he went to bed and slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Jake was no longer worried. The aliens thought they knew humans. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The morning of the second day brought new problems. Jake woke to find messages waiting from several alien delegations. None of them were friendly. The Vorthik wanted to meet privately. The Kelani had questions about human military strength. The Jeltar requested detailed maps of Earth's solar system. Jake dressed carefully and met Lisa and Ryan for breakfast in the human section of the station. The food was bland but safe, shipped from Earth in their own supplies. Around them, the station hummed with activity as thousands of beings went about their daily business. The Vorthik message bothers me, Ryan said as he read from his tablet. They want to discuss protection arrangements for Earth. That sounds like a threat. Lisa looked worried. The Kelani are asking for our ship designs and weapon specifications. Why would they need those for a trade agreement? Jake stirred his coffee and thought. 3 days ago he had been optimistic about these negotiations. Now he felt like a mouse surrounded by cats. We go to the meetings as planned, we listen to what they have to say, we learn what we can. The first meeting was with the Vorthek in their section of the station. Jake had never seen anything like it. The walls were covered with weapons from 100 different worlds. Skulls from defeated enemies hung from the ceiling. The air smelled of metal and blood. War Commander HFY sat on a throne made from the bones of some massive creature. He was even larger up close, with scars covering his scaled face. Other Vorthek warriors stood around the room like statues. Human, HFY said without standing. You have heard our Empire's generous offer. We will protect your weak species from the dangers of galactic politics. In return, Earth will provide resources and labor for our expansion. Jake kept his voice level. Ambassador Morrison. And we appreciate the offer, but Earth prefers to remain independent. HFY laughed, a sound like rocks falling. Independent? You think your tiny world can stand alone against the galaxy? You have 12 ships, human. 12. My personal fleet has more vessels than your entire species. Numbers are not everything, Jake replied. No, HFY agreed. Strength is everything. Power is everything. Your species understands neither. He leaned forward on his throne. This offer will not be made again. Think carefully. The meeting with the Kelani was different, but no better. High scientist Velana received them in a laboratory filled with strange devices that hummed and sparked. She was tall and thin with silver skin and large black eyes. Her voice never changed tone as she spoke. "We have analyzed your ship's performance. During approach," she said while looking at holographic displays, "your engines are chemical rockets." Chemical, Ambassador Morrison. "We abandoned such primitive technology before your species discovered fire." Jake tried to maintain dignity. Human. Engineering focuses on reliability and efficiency. Human engineering focuses on limitations, Valana corrected. Your weapons use solid projectiles. Your shields are simple magnetic fields. Your computers process information at speeds we achieved millennia ago. She turned to face him directly. "Perhaps we could help you advance. Our technology could make your ships faster, stronger, better. The price would be knowledge. Everything you know about your military capabilities, your defensive positions, your population centers. That information is classified," Jake said. "Then you will remain primitives forever," Valana replied and turned back to her displays. The worst was yet to come. That evening there was a formal dinner for all delegates. Jake wore his best uniform and tried to smile as he entered the great hall. Tables were arranged by species, with the most powerful races at the center and newer members toward the edges. The human table was so far away Jake could barely see the main platform. The food was strange, but edible. Jake talked quietly with Lisa and Ryan about the day's meetings. Around them, hundreds of aliens ate and talked in a dozen different languages. The noise was overwhelming. Jake excused himself to use the restroom. He was walking down a quiet corridor when he heard Lisa scream. He ran toward the sound and found her cornered by 3 Vorthic warriors. They had backed her against a wall and were reaching for her with their clawed hands. "Get away from her!" Jake shouted. The Vorthic turned and laughed. "The little diplomat comes to rescue his female," one said. "How touching." Ryan appeared from nowhere and hit the first Vorthak with a stunning blow to the throat. The alien stumbled backward, gasping. Ryan moved to help Lisa while Jake stepped between them and the other 2 warriors. "This ends now," Jake said firmly. The largest Vorthak snarled and reached for a weapon on his belt. "You dare strike a warrior of the Empire." Before anyone could react, station security arrived. They were tall blue beings with too many arms who spoke in musical tones. They looked at the scene and immediately began talking to the Vorthak in their own language. Jake could not understand the words, but the meaning was clear. The security officers were apologizing to the Vorthak for the inconvenience. They patted the warriors on their shoulders and spoke in soothing voices. "What about my aide?" Jake demanded. "She was attacked." One security officer looked at him with eyes like black marbles. "Cultural misunderstanding. Vorthak greetings sometimes seem aggressive to other species. No harm was intended. They had her cornered and were grabbing at her." "Misunderstanding," the officer repeated and walked away with the Vorthik warriors. Jake helped Lisa back to the dinner, his hands shaking with rage. She was pale but unhurt. Ryan looked ready to start a war by himself. The evening got worse. When they returned to the Great Hall, War Commander HFY was standing on the main platform addressing the crowd. Jake caught the end of his speech. And so I propose a demonstration of strength. Let the human diplomat face me in single combat. If he wins, his species may have membership. If he loses, they will serve as our clients." The hall erupted in cheers and laughter. Hundreds of aliens turned to stare at Jake. He felt every eye. In the room, judging him, measuring him, finding him wanting, Jake walked slowly toward the platform. The crowd grew quiet as he climbed the steps. HFY towered over him, easily twice his size and covered in natural armor. The alien's claws could tear him apart without effort. "I am a diplomat, not a warrior," Jake said into the silence. "I came here to talk, not to fight." The crowd exploded in laughter. Aliens from every species joined in the mockery. Jake heard words like coward and weakling in a dozen different languages. HFY raised his hand for silence. "The human refuses to fight. This proves what we all suspected. They are a race of cowards unfit for galactic society." Before Jake could respond, HFY struck him across the face with the back of his massive hand. The blow sent Jake stumbling backward. Pain exploded through his skull and blood ran from his split lip. The crowd cheered louder. Some aliens stood on their chairs to get a better view. Jake wiped blood from his mouth and looked around the hall. Not one delegate spoke in his defense. Not one voice called for justice. He straightened his uniform and walked off the platform with as much dignity as he could manage. Behind him, the crowd continued to cheer and laugh. Lisa and Ryan flanked him as they left the hall. Back in his quarters, Jake sat at his desk and composed another message to Earth. This one was longer and more detailed. He told them about the attacks, the threats, the complete breakdown of diplomacy. At the end he wrote, "Request immediate activation of all contingency protocols. Diplomatic solution no longer possible. Recommend full implementation of Operation Starfall." He sent the message and then sat back in his chair. His face still hurt from Nekvar's blow. His uniform was stained with blood. But Jake was smiling. For the first time in days, the aliens thought they had won. They thought they had broken the human spirit. They had no idea what was coming their way. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center of Luna Station watching the stars through the massive viewing window. Earth hung below them like a blue jewel against the black of space. She was a woman who had seen more wars than she cared to remember, and she could feel another one coming. The message from Ambassador Morrison had arrived 6 hours ago. Sullivan had read it 3 times before calling an emergency meeting of the military council. Now she waited for the others to arrive while her mind ran through calculations of distance, time, and firepower. General Peter Brooks entered first. He was the commander of the Colonial Marines, a man whose soldiers had fought on every human world from Mars to the outer colonies. His weathered face showed the strain of too many battles and too many losses. Director Helen Carter came next. She ran Human Intelligence, the organization that officially did not exist but somehow knew everything that happened in human space. She was small and quiet with gray eyes that missed nothing. "Admiral," Brooks said as he took his seat. Read Morrison's report. The situation is worse than we thought." Sullivan nodded. "The aliens see us as weak. They think they can treat our people like animals and we will do nothing about it." "My operatives have been reporting similar attitudes throughout the galaxy," Carter added. "The major powers view humanity as a resource to be exploited, not a species to be respected." Sullivan turned from the window to face them both. "Gentlemen, lady, it is time to show the galaxy who they are really dealing with." The planning session lasted 12 hours. Maps of local space covered every surface. Ship positions were updated by the minute. Communication protocols were established and weapon systems were checked. By the end, 3 battle groups were moving toward the Council Station under the pretense of training exercises. Admiral Sullivan transferred her flag to the Dreadnought Vengeance, humanity's newest and most powerful warship. The ship was a monster of metal and weapons, built in the shipyards of Mars using technology stolen from a dozen different species. Its hull was black as space itself and covered with gun ports like the eyes of a spider. As the fleet moved through hyperspace, Sullivan stood on the bridge reviewing intelligence reports from across the galaxy. Her people had been busy. Human agents were embedded in every major government and military organization. They had been waiting for years for orders like these on the Council Station. Jake Morrison continued his diplomatic charade while secretly coordinating with assets already in place. Marine Captain Sam Rodriguez and his special operations team had arrived weeks ago disguised as civilian technicians. They had spent their time mapping the station's defenses and identifying critical systems. Rodriguez was a man who had earned his rank in the tunnels beneath New Baghdad during the resource wars. His team consisted of soldiers who had fought their way across 3 star systems to reach the outer colonies. They moved through the station like ghosts, invisible to alien security. "Sir," Rodriguez reported during a secure communication, "we have complete blueprints of the station's power grid and defense systems. The aliens rely heavily on energy shielding and plasma weapons. Their defenses are designed to stop other energy-based attacks." Jake nodded as he received the report in his quarters. What about their military capabilities? Impressive but predictable, Rodriguez replied. The Vorthik favor direct assault tactics. The Kelani use coordinated fleet actions with advanced targeting systems. The Jeltar prefer to stay hidden and strike from ambush. All of them assume their enemies will fight the same way they do. Assumptions can be dangerous, Jake said quietly. Meanwhile, the harassment of human personnel continued to escalate. Vorthik warriors would block corridors when humans tried to pass, forcing them to find alternate routes. Kelani scientists would interrupt human communications with jamming signals, claiming it was necessary for their research. Jeltar operatives followed human staff members everywhere, making no attempt to hide their surveillance. The breaking point came when War Commander Thekvar held a press conference in the main plaza of the station. Hundreds of beings gathered to hear him speak about the future of galactic politics. The humans have proven themselves unworthy of membership in our civilized society, he announced to the crowd. They are weak, cowardly, and technologically primitive. Their world would be better served under the protection of a stronger species. The crowd cheered and applauded. Jake watched from the back of the plaza, his face showing no emotion even as rage burned in his chest. Thekvar continued his speech. I propose that Earth be declared a protectorate. The Vorthik Empire would generously assume responsibility for governing this backward world. We would provide security and guidance while the humans provide labor and resources for more important endeavors. More cheers erupted from the assembled aliens. Some began chanting in their native languages. Jake could hear the words conquest and subjugation, repeated in a dozen different tongues, but Thekvar was not finished. Of course, the humans might object to this arrangement. They might even try to resist with their pathetic little fleet. He laughed, a sound like breaking stone. My personal squadron could destroy every human ship in existence within a single day. The crowd loved this. They pressed closer to the platform, eager to hear more about humanity's coming humiliation. Earth has 12 warships, Thekvar continued. 12. My empire has over 3,000 vessels. The Kelani have 5,000. The Jeltar maintain fleets in every system. What hope do these primitives have against such power? Jake turned and walked away from the plaza. He had heard enough. That evening he sent another message to Admiral Sullivan. This one contained just 2 words: begin operation. 3 star systems away, the human fleet received Jake's signal and changed course. Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching her tactical display as 30 warships moved through hyperspace toward their target. Admiral, her communications officer reported, we are receiving requests for identification from border patrols in 6 different systems. Send them the standard responses, Sullivan ordered. Training exercise, routine patrol, scheduled maintenance. Give them whatever story will buy us time. The alien patrols were satisfied with the explanations. After all, what threat could 12 human ships possibly pose? Their intelligence services had counted every vessel in the human fleet. They knew exactly how outgunned and outnumbered humanity was. What they did not know was that humans had learned to lie very well during their short time among the stars. Back on the station, Jake continued his diplomatic duties with perfect calm. He attended meetings where aliens discussed dividing human space among themselves. He sat through lectures about humanity's primitive technology and backward culture. He smiled and nodded while beings who had never fought for anything planned the conquest of his world, but late at night he sent coded messages to operatives throughout the galaxy. Sleeper agents who had waited years for activation suddenly received new orders. Marine units disguised as civilian workers began moving into position around critical installations. Intelligence officers started downloading classified files from alien computer networks. The storm was coming, and Jake Morrison was the calm at its center on the final night before everything changed. Jake sat in his quarters writing in his personal journal. He thought about Earth, about the blue skies and green fields he might never see again. He thought about his wife, Sarah, waiting for him in their home in Denver. He thought about the children he had never had and the peaceful future that might. Never come. Then he thought about War Commander Thekvar and his threats. He thought about the Kalani who wanted to steal human technology. He thought about the Jeltar who saw humanity as nothing more than a curiosity to be studied. Jake smiled as he closed his journal. Tomorrow they would learn what happens when you mistake human restraint for human weakness. Tomorrow the galaxy would discover that sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous of all. The alarms began screaming at 0600 station time. Every being on the council station woke to the sound of emergency signals echoing through the corridors. Red lights flashed in every section as the automatic systems detected the impossible. 30. Human warships had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. In the command center, Station Commander Velteth stared at his displays in disbelief. He was a veteran of 3 galactic wars and had never seen anything like this. The human fleet had appeared from nowhere, moving in perfect formation toward the station. How is this possible? He demanded of his sensor operators. Our intelligence. Reports show the humans have only 12 ships in their entire fleet. His aide, a nervous Kalani scientist, checked the readings 3 times before answering. Sir, our sensors are detecting 30 distinct vessels. All of them are broadcasting human identification codes. Velteth felt his blood turn cold. Get me War Commander Thekvar immediately. Across the station, Thekvar was already awake and screaming orders at his subordinates. The Vorthak had built their reputation on military superiority, and the sight of an unexpected human fleet was more than embarrassing, it was impossible. Launch the 3rd Battle Squadron, he roared at his fleet commander. Show these primitives what real warships look like. Admiral Kreshtok, Thekvar's most experienced naval officer, hesitated for just a moment. Sir, should we attempt communication first? Perhaps discover their intentions? Thekvar's hand moved to his weapon. Their intentions are irrelevant? No one brings a fleet to council space without permission. Destroy them. 12 Vorthak warships launched from their docking bays and moved toward the human fleet. They were massive vessels, each one 3 times larger than the biggest human ship. Their hulls gleamed with energy shielding and their weapon ports glowed with charged plasma on the bridge of the Vengeance. Admiral Sullivan watched the enemy fleet approach with calm interest. She was a small woman with iron-gray hair and eyes, like winter storms. Her uniform bore the scars of 24 battles fought in the darkness between stars. Admiral, her tactical officer reported, 12 Vorthak vessels approaching in standard attack formation. They are powering weapons and targeting our lead ships. Sullivan nodded. Signal the fleet? Engage Protocol 7. Show them what humans learned in the Martian War. The human ships spread out in a formation no alien had ever seen before. Instead of the tight group tactics favored by most species, they scattered across space like seeds on the wind. Each vessel became an independent hunter, free to choose its own targets and methods. The Vorthak fleet continued its approach, confident in their superiority. Their ships were larger, their weapons more powerful, their shields nearly impenetrable. What could primitive humans do against such might? They found out when the first human missiles struck home. The weapons came from nowhere, moving faster than anything the Vorthak sensors could track. They were not energy beams or plasma bolts, but solid projectiles that ignored shields and tore through armor like paper. The lead Vorthak ship shuddered as 3 missiles punched through its hull and exploded inside its engine room. Impossible, Admiral Kreshtok whispered as his flagship rocked under the impact. Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields. His weapons officer was frantically checking his instruments. Sir, the humans are not using energy weapons. These are kinetic projectiles, solid masses moving at incredible speed. Our shields are designed to stop plasma and laser fire. More missiles struck the Vorthak fleet. The human ships moved like dancers, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted effectively. Their weapons reached across space with deadly accuracy while the enemy fired uselessly at empty coordinates. The battle lasted exactly 43 minutes. When it ended, 12 Vorthak warships were drifting hulks or expanding clouds of debris. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel, On the council station, every being with access to communications watched the impossible battle unfold. Species that had thought themselves masters of warfare stared in shock as the humans destroyed a Vorthak fleet without breaking formation. Hi. Scientist Villana of the Kelani studied the combat data with growing horror. Their ships are using technologies we dismissed as primitive. Chemical rockets for propulsion, kinetic weapons for offense, magnetic fields for defense. But they have perfected these systems beyond anything we imagined possible. Elder Quinsith of the Geltar watched through sensors that had observed the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations. These humans fight like nothing we have encountered. Before, they do not seek honor or glory in battle. They simply win. As the last Vorthak ship exploded, Admiral Sullivan opened a communication channel to the council station. Her voice echoed through every speaker in the massive structure, calm and cold as the void between stars. This is Admiral Kate Sullivan. Of the human colonial fleet, I am here to collect Ambassador Morrison and his delegation. Anyone who attempts to interfere will share the fate of the Vorthak squadron. In the council chambers, Jake Morrison stood and straightened his uniform. The alien delegates who had mocked him for days now stared in silence. The human who had seemed so weak and helpless was looking at them with eyes like steel. Honored. Delegates, Jake said in the same polite tone he had used throughout the negotiations. I believe there has been a misunderstanding about humanity's capabilities. War Commander Thekvar rose from his seat, his face twisted with rage. You tricked us! You lied about your fleet strength! Jake smiled, and for the first time it was not a diplomatic smile. We told you exactly what you wanted to hear. You assumed our ships were weak because they looked different from yours. You assumed our weapons were primitive because they used different principles. You assumed we were helpless because we chose not to fight. High Scientist Villana spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. How many ships do you really have? Enough, Jake replied. The 30 vessels you see are just the advance guard. Earth has been preparing for this day since our first contact with galactic civilization. We learned quickly that the galaxy respects only strength. Elder Quinsith leaned forward on his ancient throne. What do you want from us? Jake's expression never changed. The same thing we asked for when we arrived. Membership in the Galactic Trade Consortium, recognition as a sovereign species, respect for our territorial boundaries. The only difference is that now we are not asking. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates from dozens of species shouted questions and demands in 100 different languages. Some called for surrender, others for continued resistance. A few simply stared at the human ambassador as if seeing him for the first time. Through it all, Jake stood calmly waiting for the noise to die down. When it finally did, he continued speaking. For 3 days you have insulted our delegation. You have threatened our world. You have treated human beings like animals to be bought and sold. Each offense has been carefully recorded and documented. He paused and looked directly at Thekvar. You struck a diplomatic representative during formal negotiations. In human culture, that is considered an act of war. The Vorthak commander's hand moved to his weapon. You dare threaten the Vorthak Empire? I am not threatening anyone, Jake replied. I am simply explaining the consequences of your actions. Admiral Sullivan has 40 more battle groups positioned throughout this sector. Our intelligence operatives have been embedded in your governments for 2 years. Our special forces teams are currently occupying strategic positions on 30 different worlds. The delegates stared at him in horrified silence. How had the weak, primitive humans penetrated their security so completely? Jake continued his revelation. We have been studying all of you since first contact. Your military tactics, your political structures, your technological capabilities. We learned that most galactic species fight according to rigid traditions and honor codes. They engage in formal battles with agreed-upon rules. He walked closer to the assembly, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. Humans do not fight for honor, we fight to win. We have spent 3 years preparing for the day when diplomacy would fail. Today is that day. Station Commander WrathHFY's voice crackled over the communication system. All delegates, please remain calm. The situation is under control. But everyone could hear the fear in his voice. Through the viewing ports, they could see the human fleet maintaining its position, like a pack of wolves surrounding prey. Jake reached into his briefcase and withdrew a single document. This is humanity's final offer. Full membership in all galactic organizations. Recognition of human territorial claims. Immediate cessation of all hostile activities against human personnel and property. You have 1 hour to comply. And if we refuse? The Kvar growled. Jake looked at him with eyes that had seen the deaths of cities and the birth of new worlds. Then you will learn why humans became the dominant species on a planet where everything tried to kill them. You will discover what happens when a race that evolved from predators decides to stop pretending to be civilized. The chamber fell silent except for the distant hum of the station systems. Outside, 30 human warships waited patiently for orders while their crews prepared for whatever came next. The galaxy had awakened a sleeping giant, and now they would face the consequences of their arrogance. The hour passed in tense silence. Throughout the galaxy, sleeping cells of human operatives received activation codes they had memorized but hoped never to use. On 100 worlds, people who had spent years building normal lives suddenly became soldiers again. Captain Maria Santos had been working as a shipping clerk on the Vorthak homeworld for 18 months. Her coworkers knew her as a quiet human who kept to herself and did her job well. They had no idea she was a veteran of the Siege of Europa who could build explosives from common household items. At exactly 1800 station time, she received a single-word message on her personal communicator. Starfall. She smiled for the first time in months, opened her equipment locker, and began assembling the charges that would cripple the planet's primary communication array. Similar scenes played out across Vorthak space. A maintenance worker disabled the shield generators protecting their largest shipyard. A restaurant cook introduced a computer virus into the traffic control systems of their busiest trade hub. A librarian who had spent 2 years cataloging ancient texts walked into the Imperial archives and began downloading classified military files. The Vorthak were not the only targets. On the Kelani research world of Nexus Prime, Dr. John Mitchell had spent 3 years pretending to be a struggling xenobiologist. His colleagues had often laughed at his primitive human equipment and outdated theories. None of them suspected he was actually a colonel in human intelligence, who held advanced degrees in computer science and electronic warfare when his activation code arrived. Mitchell stood up from his desk and walked to the central data core that controlled every research project on the planet. His fingers moved across the interfaces with practiced precision as he began uploading viruses that would corrupt every Kelani database on the planet. The Xeltar discovered their own vulnerabilities when their ancient information network suddenly went dark. For a species that had spent millennia accumulating knowledge, the loss of their data archives was more devastating than any physical attack. The humans responsible were so deeply embedded in their systems that the Xeltar had been unknowingly training them for years. Back on the council station, the alien delegates watched in growing horror as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The humans had not just hidden their fleet strength. They had been preparing for total war. War Commander WrathHFY stood at the communication console receiving frantic messages from his homeworld. Sir, all our primary communications are down. The orbital defense platforms are not responding. We have lost contact with 17 major installations. High Scientist Velana was experiencing her own nightmare. Her research facilities were reporting system failures across multiple worlds. 3 years of advanced experiments had been wiped out in minutes. Prototype weapons were offline. Critical data had vanished. How is this possible? She whispered as she read report after report of sabotage. Our security systems are the most advanced in the galaxy. Jake Morrison stood calmly in the center of the council chamber, watching the alien leaders discover the scope of human preparation. You focused on keeping other species out of your systems. You never considered that the primitive humans you allowed inside might be more dangerous than any external threat. Elder Quinseth spoke in a voice like rustling leaves. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the day we made first contact," Jake replied. "We knew that peaceful coexistence would be ideal, but we also knew it might not be possible. So we prepared for both outcomes." Admiral Sullivan's voice echoed through the station's communication system. "Council delegates, you now have a choice. Accept humanity's terms immediately, or watch your civilizations crumble piece by piece." To emphasize her point, she transmitted tactical data to every screen on the station. The displays showed human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Battle groups that had been thought to be training exercises were revealed to be strategic deployments. Supply convoys were actually troop transports carrying marine assault teams. The numbers were staggering. Instead of 12 ships, humanity possessed over 300 combat vessels. Instead of a single colony world, they controlled settlements in 40 star systems. Instead of a small population of refugees, Earth commanded the loyalty of 50 million humans scattered across the galaxy. "Impossible," Dekvar breathed as he stared at the data. "Our intelligence services counted every human ship, every human world." "Your intelligence services saw what we wanted them to see," Jake said. "Hidden shipyards and asteroid fields. Camouflaged colonies on worlds you thought were empty. Supply caches disguised as mining operations. We have been building a war machine while you dismissed us as harmless primitives." The scope of the deception was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. For 3 years, humanity had played the role of weak newcomers while secretly positioning themselves for this moment. Every diplomatic contact had been an intelligence-gathering mission. Every trade agreement had been a cover for military reconnaissance station. Commander Velteth tried to regain control of the situation. "Surely we can negotiate. There must be some arrangement that satisfies all parties." Jake turned to face him with eyes that held no warmth. "The time for negotiation was 3 days ago. You chose mockery instead of respect. You chose threats instead of diplomacy. You chose to treat human beings as animals instead of equals." He walked to the central platform where Dekvar had struck him. The blood had been cleaned away, but the memory remained fresh. Now you face the consequences of those choices. Reports continued to flood in from across the galaxy. Vorthik warships found themselves stranded when their fuel supplies mysteriously exploded. Kalani research stations lost power when their reactors were sabotaged from within. Jeltar intelligence networks discovered that their most trusted operatives were actually human agents. The aliens who had seemed so powerful just hours before were now reduced to begging for mercy from the species they had scorned. The weak had become strong. The primitives had revealed themselves as masters of deception and warfare. "What do you want?" Lilana asked in a broken voice. Jake smiled, but it was not a kind expression. "Everything we asked for originally, plus reparations for the insults and attacks on our people. Full membership in all galactic organizations with voting rights proportional to our actual strength. Recognition of human territorial claims throughout this sector of space. And formal apologies from every species that participated in our humiliation." Dekvar's pride finally cracked. "The Vorthik Empire does not apologize to inferior species." "Then the Vorthik Empire will burn," Jake replied without emotion. "Admiral Sullivan has 30 battle groups positioned around your homeworld. Your defenses are down. Your fleet is scattered. You have approximately 6 hours before the bombardment begins." The Vorthik commander looked around the chamber for support, but found only alien faces turned away in shame and fear. Even his own allies had abandoned him rather than face human wrath. "I accept your terms," he said through gritted teeth. One by one, the other species followed. The Kelani agreed to cease all attempts to steal human technology. The Jeltar promised to share their archives with human scholars. Dozens of minor powers begged to be included in any treaty that would spare them from human anger. Jake nodded as each capitulation was recorded. "Excellent. Admiral Sullivan will provide the detailed terms within the hour. Any species that fails to comply fully will discover that human patience has limits." As the alien delegates filed out of the chamber, Jake remained behind with Lisa and Ryan. The aide was staring at him as if seeing him for the first time. "Sir," she said quietly, "I had no idea about any of this." Jake's expression softened slightly. "I know, the deception had to be complete. Even my own staff could not know the full scope of our preparations." Ryan stepped forward. "Ambassador, what happens now?" Jake looked out through the viewing port at the human fleet maintaining its position around the station. "Now we build the galaxy we want instead of accepting the one they offered us. Humanity is no longer asking for its place among the stars. We are taking it." Hours later, Jake sat in his quarters composing a final message to Earth. The negotiations were over. The treaties were signed. The galaxy had learned to fear and respect humanity in equal measure. "Mission accomplished," he wrote. "Humanity is no longer the newest member of galactic civilization. We are its newest masters. The weak have become strong, and the strong have learned to kneel." He sealed the message and sent it toward Earth at light speed. Then he poured himself a drink and raised it in a toast to the stars outside his window. The galaxy had thought they were dealing with sheep. They discovered too late that humans had simply been wolves in sheep's clothing, waiting for the right moment to reveal their fangs. The age of human dominance had begun.